Welcome, everyone, to Pacific Northwest Farmers Co-op Market Update for March 31st, 2026. I'm Lane Hannis, and joining me today is Shane Rebold and Mac Reynolds. So before we get started, I've got a short disclaimer. The views and opinions of this program are of the hosts and for informational purposes only. There's substantial risk in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. So the basis of today's podcast is mostly going to be the quarterly stocks and prospective plantings report that we saw today. So I'll go ahead and start with what we saw for the big three: corn, soybeans, and wheat. What this survey was a survey of 73,800 farmers in the first 2 weeks of March to get an idea of what they're going to plant for this coming crop year. Of course, we had a pretty good idea what their winter wheat plantings were. All that data was submitted to FSA this winter. But for the corn and soybeans, it's a big unknown, and we do expect to see changes as we move through the planting season. Basically, what we saw today was a 3% reduction in total corn acres from last year to 95.3 million acres, and an increase on soybean acres to a total of 84.7 million acres, up 4% from last year. Now on to wheat. So a little more interesting, it is the lowest acreage for all wheat, both winter and spring, since estimates started coming in 1919. That acreage number is 43.8 million. In 2020, we said the same thing. It was the lowest acreage ever since 1919. That was at 44.5 million acres of all wheat. That was construed pretty bullishly today in the market. Markets were up before the report. There was a good spike minutes after it came out, and then it kind of settled back down to where we were before the report. Before I go on, let's talk about what you guys see in your commodities, canola and pulses.
Yeah, I'll take off first. Canola took off as same as soybeans. They were up 15% year over year. Topped out estimated number was 2.6 million acres of canola versus 25 at 2.3. Same kind of story. We'll talk about why here later, but barley was kind of unchanged, similar corresponding years. Kind of a sleeper.
Okay.
Yeah, and over on the pulses side, at least the ones we care about in this region, dry-edible peas, really no changes year over year, looking like we're coming in right at 100% of what we did last year. Then we'll look at chickpeas. Looks like a slight reduction in planted acres there. They're calling for maybe a 7% reduction. Diving into that a little further, you're seeing, very similar numbers overall last year to what we saw for large chickpeas and more of a reduction, about 9% in small chickpeas. But overall, it's, not any major surprises there, I don't think. And then lentils. This one caught me a little bit off guard. I was expecting more lentil acres to be planted. And they're calling for about a 22% reduction in planted acres there.
Yeah. How does that change look state by state? Do we look stable in the Northwest versus Montana or North Dakota?
The Northwest, the limited data that's available out there, I think we're probably a little light. I think we should see a higher number than the 57,000 acres they're calling for in Washington. But Montana, North Dakota, they're both showing pretty substantial reduction in acres, and I can't disagree with that. Staying on the same theme of those two states, as we look at their planting intentions on chickpeas, we are seeing more interest in Montana on small chickpeas, especially. They're up about 19% from last year, from 59,000 to 70,000 acres. I think there's some speculation in the market that that's probably what they've got in the bin, and there's some opportunities to put that in the ground. So save on seed costs there.
That's what I expected to see, higher lentils, just because it is a lower cost crop to put in the ground. So it was surprising to me as well.
Well, we've seen so much interest just in our area, it seems like.
Yeah, which is why I kind of struggle with where the Washington seeding intentions this year are unchanged.
Yeah. So I talked about it in the beginning here. These are the prospective plantings report. On June 30th, we will get another seeding report that is the actual amount seeded. So we've got until then to firm those numbers up. I noticed something in the report with spring wheat. North Dakota grows about half of the United States spring wheat, and their total acreage is down 8%. Notice that canola was up 15 cents in that state, and soybeans are expected to be higher there. Why might that be?
I think canola just bodes well on a strong spring crop. Prices have been stable here at these levels. We've hit records, with contract highs previously, and it definitely supports it. And North Dakota's definitely built, and they've got the big infrastructure to handle canola. So it's kind of an easier swap in and out for them.
Yeah.
It would be my vote.
A play on fertilizer as well?
I think so. Definitely. We've heard that guy talk about the Midwest being locked in for fertilizer, but up in kind of that area, are they still, more open to market variability on that? I think definitely.
Yeah, that's something that's been talked about a lot here this month is how the rising fertilizer costs are going to impact what gets planted this spring. And from what we've been hearing, the Central Corn Belt has got good coverage for their nitrogen needs for this spring. It's going to turn into a problem for them next year. More of the Western Corn Belt, the Dakotas, Nebraska, less coverage there. So that's where we're seeing the acreage switch away from corn and the spring wheat into something like soybeans or canola.
Would you say that's where the majority of the switch came from?
It looks that way. Yeah, that western side of the Corn Belt for sure. So the other report that came out today was a stocks report. So while everything on wheat so far sounds bullish, the lowest acres since 1919, we got a reminder that March 1st stocks of this year were 1.3 billion bushels of all wheat. That's up 5% year over year. So we've got a 3% reduction in acres. We're sitting on 5% more wheat right now than we were last year. That's a wash. Now, what does actual production look like? We've got a weather store developing. We'll get into that when we talk about our cash markets.
Corn stocks reports, anything we've seen drastically on those numbers?
The change or the numbers printed for corn and soybeans were also higher, 10 to 11% versus March 1st of last year. That's coming off of really big crops, and the exports on soybeans were slow to start. We've got a lot more soybeans to ship, so the ending stocks number will be trimmed down. But as of March 1st, those stocks are still higher year on year.
Yeah. How much do you think we'll end the year with, with increased exports that we've seen here recently?
Would have to jump back into the WASD and take a look at those numbers, but I think for soybeans it is tighter. Corn, it's still pretty comfortable, over 2 billion bushels.
I think we'll match up to what we should be
Right.
or should have been.
Yeah.
With the slow start.
Yeah. Cash and futures markets. Let's look at what's happened here leading up to the report and where we go. So again, we're up higher today in wheat, corn, soybeans, all the futures markets higher, canola even. The story has still been the conflict in Iran. Oil prices are high, still over $100 a barrel. That's lending support to all commodities. The other story for wheat is that in the U.S. Southern Plains, we've got dry conditions that are persisting and not much relief. What have you heard on that front?
Reports came out from the USDA. The next 7-day weather outlook puts, that Kansas would be western Oklahoma, panhandle of Texas, that Maine hard red winter belt, probably 80% of it is going to be pretty thin on moisture. They're already fighting a drought areas. So definitely no help there. Even seeing some reports, a grower sent me some images today of a group on Facebook that talks about, those big harvest companies that move up from the region. One of those guys actually lost his contracts in Oklahoma, was trying to get more business. So I think it might be a little bit more real than what we've kind of read into. Mm-hmm. We've always taken it as a grain of salt. Oh, we got to kill this thing a couple times. Well, we might have used a couple of these lives,
sure. Yeah. So on top of the lower acreage, we're looking at lower yield for the United States. So eating away at the ending stocks that we've built up. So maybe that keeps things elevated. It's getting easier and easier to paint a bullish picture for wheat in the United States. So
definitely helpful.
In white wheat specifically, our ending stocks, given current exports, are good. I think think they're manageable. They're not overburdening, but they're not really tight either. We're looking at, as of today, you look outside and the winter wheat looks great. And so with a good crop and average exports, cash prices should have a top on them. Lately, they've been supported by futures. We're seeing basis values that are very weak, negative in a lot of cases. So I think what's been going on. A lot of hedge to arrive contracts are being written. That's still a good strategy. We can wait for that basis to improve. What it's going to take is for futures to come back down, in my opinion.
What's your views on kind of export outlook over the next couple months, and then the strategy as we flip into new crop? Is there going to be any squeeze there?
I don't think
Or
so.
Kind of sales
When we're
already?
talking, we got to step back and look at the world again, because as we talked about in the last podcast, of the major producers in the world, so many of them had a crop that was either their first or second or third largest ever. So in the world, there's a lot of wheat stocks. Places like Australia that supplies the same commodity to the same countries we export to has good stocks. So we're not going to see a big spike in exports as we move towards new crop. And hopefully we get lots of new crop sales on so that we can keep the stuff moving and keep the market fluid. But really don't expect anything to run away. Yeah. Comments on our pulse markets, given the situation in Iran. If things start to settle down there, are we going to see a change?
As we look at these pulse markets, one of the things to keep in mind is as we look at our planning intentions, especially on chickpeas, we're relatively unchanged from last year. Even a 7% reduction, well, it's a reduction in acres. A lot of our competitors globally are seeing very similar acreages to what they had last year, not seeing a huge swing in that. So there's feels like there's ample stocks available out there, but we have found levels that trade. And now as things get settled down in Iran, hopefully in the coming months here, I think it'll create some opportunities for us. They could be very short-lived, and it takes a long time for stuff to get from the U.S. West Coast into Iran. You're looking at a 4 to 6 month transit right now with the ocean carriers. So definitely some opportunities could be coming our way, but when and how much of an opportunity, that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
How much help do you think just getting the UAE back online would help our situation?
I had a good export partner we work with point this out to me. If you look at that Persian Gulf region, and basically either side of the Persian Gulf, there's about 100 million people in that region. And they don't have the ability to produce much of their own stocks. So they're really heavily dependent on imports. Well, they like to buy from the U.S. and Canada. So there's going to be some opportunities there when that opens up. It's a matter of timing. Talking to somebody else today, if it takes too long, they'll have to go find it somewhere else in that region. So.
Okay. Well, we'll move into our closing thoughts here. Anything else to add that we haven't covered?
The only thing that I would probably add on the canola part, and that kind of adds into this or transfers us into this situation is, current market outlook and standings. Old crops sitting at 1975, $20, new crops in the 25, 2050. Even though futures have stabilized and kind of trended back up to that higher end that we've seen here a couple weeks ago. The big uphill we've been fighting here lately is the kind of degradation of the Canadian dollar. It's just fallen off a cliff these last few weeks, and mostly I believe to crude oil. Energies are so expensive. The world economies have kind of gotten shook up in this whole ordeal. U.S. dollar's off a bit. The Australian dollar's off a bit. Definitely the Canadian loony's taken the biggest hit out of all three. So kind of explains why we've had, future stabilized, but the price went down. It's like, what the heck's going on? Well, that's the one that took our wind out of the sails.
Exchange rates, sure.
Yeah.
Then we're seeing basis back off at Warden too, right?
Extremely.
They're booking purchases and getting fulls, so
Yep.
that's going to have that basis come back.
Yep. New crop. They know it's coming. They're than what's coming down the pipe. So, then demand just all around is just full. Up front, there's a carry in the market, so we're playing that to our advantage.
Yeah.
Definitely incentivizing guys to take advantage. These are great levels. Anything with a 2 in front of it after the year we've seen, I'm not saying blow the whole thing out, but let's get something on the books, get a foothold.
On top of that, we see the numbers today. Canola plantings are expected to go higher.
Yep. So
Yeah.
what,
Didn't we see, wasn't it the second most acreage in the United States for canola this year? Is that right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Versus-
Idaho's going to have the most acres.
They are. Idaho's the most acres at 100. Their previous record was 97,000 acres, and Washington's currently stands at 160,000 acres, which was the same in 24. So
Yeah.
big crop around. Here locally, we know there's good chunks. So let's get something on the books, take advantage. Showed that chart at the grower meeting. We usually have historically, we have a rally here, pre-seeding. We see these planted acres, actually what made it in the ground. Have a little bit of pullback because buyers know that there's going to be a crop to be had. And then post-harvest is kind of a 50-50, depending on stocks and weather and how the crop actually turned out.
Right.
Probably not as big as last year's crop as pounds per acre, where Canada set a record. But I think there'll still be some stocks to trade. So
Okay. All right. Mac, anything else?
Yeah, just kind of outlook on pulse crops. Definitely feels like we're going to see some opportunities within the year, as we always do, but going to be pretty range bound, I think, as kind of close to where we are now as far as values go. Again, just a function of ample supplies available in the world. You hate to wish ill on the neighbors, but if somebody else had a crop failure somewhere in the world, it'd really help our markets out.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
what do you think on wheat?
Yeah, to tie a bow on things here, what should you be doing with your wheat marketing? Your activity in the futures market has been very good as a farmer. Continue to do that. Set targets at higher levels. When we're not watching and the markets are trading overnight, we walk in here and we have fills, and we love that. So on the cash side, it's, I think, worth a wait. We are still not seeing a whole lot of definition in the new crop July-August shipping period for cash sales yet. Hopefully we do see some stronger basis, although I think, again, it's going to take futures coming down. So get that futures side of it taken care of now. Options for flex contracts, those values are still good. We still have big daily volatility, so it's going to keep premiums at a good level. Today, every wheat contract except May made its highest close on the chart.
So we did close.
Yeah,
higher than
so I'm not sure if that's going to be a buy signal for the hedge funds or not, but it is just an interesting note on the charts that we made the highest close that we have in the history of these contracts. So that is a positive note. Again, it's easy to paint a bullish story for wheat today. Let's hope that continues. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.
yep. Thanks, everyone.